Okay.
Try now,
Welcome.
just in case.
Okay. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for having me here. I am Andra. My pronouns are they, them. I'm currently training with Sociocracy for All to be a consultant. So this is part of my practice to get familiar with consulting. And yeah, I'm a certified Sociocratic trainer, and I've been teaching Sociocracy for about a year now. And I'm currently on the board at Lost Valley Education Center, which has been using Sociocracy for over 10 years now. So that's how I got familiar with it. And yeah, I'm really excited to share it with you today. So I like to start out these training sessions with a little bit of a check-in. So if folks feel like it, they can put a couple words in the chat or some emojis in the chat for how they're feeling today. Just like to see what kind of energy is in the room. And yeah, get a feel for our time together. It looks like you can't maybe do emojis in this chat. That's okay. But yeah, so maybe just a couple words. How are you feeling today? A couple people are excited. That's good news. Looking forward to learning. Feeling overloaded. All energy is welcome. Thank you for saying that. Excited, hungry and tired, focused. Love it. Happy to be here. Beautiful. Cool. Good to know what the texture of the room is, kind of feeling into how everyone's doing and yeah, where we're at today so we can start building that consensus reality, that shared reality. You'll hear me talk about that a lot during this presentation. So thank you for contributing and bringing your energy to this space. So with that, I'll go ahead and start my presentation because there's some folks in your organization who have said that they're interested in exploring sociocracy as a governance method. And I just like to start with a little bit of us getting on the same page about what sociocracy is and how we might proceed together so you can feel it in your body and just see like, is this a good fit for you? Do you like the idea of this? And moving into that together. So let me put my notes up here. All right, and then I also emailed you all a copy of these slides, and so you'll have them for your notes. And yeah, just curious, we can do sort of popcorn style, but thinking maybe just closing your eyes for a moment and feeling into your body, maybe taking a couple deep breaths. And just want to name and recognize that governance and power, those are big topics. They can bring up a lot of emotions. So just moving through this content gently with yourself and just bringing an open mind, bringing your curiosity here to the space. And as you think about your curiosity, what is it that inspired you to show up today? What are you curious about? Or even maybe what's not working in the spaces you're in that you'd like to see maybe open up and be a little broader, maybe more equitable? Yeah, just what's your inspiration for showing up today? What are your curiosities? And just something that no could maybe sit a little different in the organizations that you're in right now. So with that question on our minds, we can go ahead and open our eyes, and you can raise your hand or you can, yeah, just come off mute and maybe share with the group, what's your curiosity? Why are you here today? You feel like being brave? Go for it, Sage.
Yeah, so I'm here because I've grown used to models of governance that include the military, corporate America, and I've been very heavily, I guess, socialized under those models, and I know there's other options. And so now I'm trying to deprogram a little bit and understand what the other options are. So I'm very curious in that way.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you. And Ryan.
Yeah, I've been interested in how groups self-organize and self-govern for quite some time. It's a big question mark on creating successful communities, to me. And I've done a lot of kind of projecting out how things can go wrong. One of them is a centralized focus of power in a community. Um, and how do you mitigate that, as well as foster leadership among the community, as sort of a growth path for folks that maybe feel like they're not empowered, you know, and that to build more engagement. So I'm thinking that sociocracy has a lot of that built into it, which really interests me. So yeah.
Yay. Love to hear that. Thank you so much. And Brad.
Yeah, I have some background in sociocracy, read the book years ago, helped put on as some of our people know, helped put on a workshop with John Bach in Santa Barbara, again, years ago. Have used it to some degree, not fully in a couple groups. What I like about it, kind of picking up a little bit on what Ryan said there, is a balance point between, on the one hand, kind of traditional Western, nobody can see me, but I'm making a um, pyramid here. Oh, you can see me. Okay. I couldn't see myself. A pyramid here. From the traditional, pyramid with the dominant or charismatic leader at the top, depending on what kind of group it is, on the one hand. And then the other hand, from my extensive experience, completely dysfunctional idea of no hierarchy. Everybody who walks in the door has equal say, no matter what. And, that kind of equality has, well, two things I want to say and then give up the floor. On the one hand, it doesn't recognize that everybody has different experience, gifts, levels of character, maturity, commitment, all sorts of things, intelligence, creativity, all sorts of different gifts and qualities and deficiencies, all of us. And it also doesn't, what was the other thing it doesn't recognize? That, anyway, I'll just leave it at that one. I said enough. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for bringing that in. We'll definitely be talking about that today. Great. And then Ken and Janella.
Unmute.
It's been a while since it's been a while since I've been on Zoom. I thought I could hit space bar, but that didn't work. Um, so we are closer to joining or building a community wherever we end up or wherever we land. And a friend of ours that's in we meet once a week, and they passed on their invitation for this. And there's kind of the synchronicity lined up for us today to say, okay, we've reviewed that before, we know what this is, but now seeing that there's 10 people in the same space that are talking about it, that's just good inspiration to continue learning about it and see where we end up. So that's why we're here.
Yay, beautiful.
Can I interject briefly here in Andra, because if I put my hand up again, you might think it was just still left out. Everybody else knows each other here except for Ken and Janella. I don't know if we have time, but for me, and I think the rest of our group, even though we can't all introduce ourselves to you, Ken and Janella, and I'm asking you, Andra, and you're totally welcome to say no, it doesn't fit. But if they had a chance to give a 2 or 3 minute introduction of themselves, what Ken just said sounded very interesting. I'm curious, anyway, I'm just requesting that, but with total, recognition that you're in charge here, Andra.
Yeah, I'm curious, Ken and Janella, how you feel about that. I'm fine with that.
Yeah, we already know each other pretty well, so we're okay.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah,
So
maybe a little introduction.
we do recognize both Julie and Eric from past opportunity with Gaia and the NVC course that we took, the Compassionate Circle is a fantastic opportunity for us there. Actually, that spurred from the same community that we're in digitally. Very brief version of what's going on is we do live in Northwest Ohio. We're right outside of Lake Erie. We like to say that we're on the western basin of Lake Erie more than in Ohio. And while we enjoy the weather, this is not going to be our forever home. We have a few more kids that need to fledge, and then we're going to go away from here. Where that is, we still haven't landed yet. And we do believe that wherever we go, even if we decided to stay here, we could build our own community, but we're focused on community far more than geography. So spending a lot of time on learning the right ways and what we feel is right. I mean, everything's right for anybody anywhere. I'll give them that, whether it's whatever form of government they subscribe to, but the current one that we're under, even though I was a key role in a lot of that in my past, walking away from that. So I need to learn and see and do new things. Yeah. Do you want to speak to?
That was a good summary.
Okay. So that's us. So thank you for the opportunity to say hello, and we trust that you all know each other well enough, and that's good.
Beautiful. Thank you, Brad, for bringing that to our attention. And yeah. Okay, beautiful. Thank you for that. It's good to know a little bit about where you're all coming from and what your curiosities are so that I can focus on that today. And okay, so I'll jump right into it from here. So yeah, I just want to talk about what is governance? What are we talking about when I even say that word? So in sociocracy, we like to talk about it as steering, like how the organization is steered, how decisions are made and ratified, who is making the decisions, and then how do we review and improve over time as a group. So when we talk governance, that's kind of what we're talking about there. And then, as many of you mentioned, you might want to shift toward more collaborative, more decentralized governance to have more engagement from the people on your team. You can move away from those top-down structures. You can make informed decisions with the people who are most impacted so that you're making sure that you're hearing their voices in the room. Leave meetings feeling energized and excited and inspired. I'm sure we've all left meetings feeling like, oh, this is such a drag. But there's a reason for that. There's a culture that gets created in some of the meetings, and if it's not named, if it's not acknowledged, if it's not moved through as the group, then it can be really taxing on our nervous systems, especially over Zoom. And then we honestly have experienced, a lot of us, I think we're all based in the US as far as I know. So this majority rules voting does tend to foster division and divisiveness. And so moving away from that as a model can help us, just be more collaborative and be on the same team together in that shared reality. So I want to name that. I've worked with a few groups to implement sociocracy before, and one thing that I've found is that if we don't have a few key shared values, then that's really the first place to start in a group, because otherwise it's going to kind of unravel itself. So the things that I have found that are really important for us all to really care deeply about is collective decision making and empowering each other. Commitment to process, so talking it out instead of, just the moment there's conflict, leaving the group. And growth mindset, so just constant evolution, constant desire for growth, and then respect for diverse perspectives. So you kind of have to care about other people's opinions to move into collaborative governance. So I've had situations where oh, I don't want to share decision-making power. I'm like, okay, this might not be a good fit for you. So I just want to name those things. And these are great places to start if your group is not feeling ready. Okay, actually, let's talk about do we want to give people decision-making power? Do we want to focus on growth? Do we want to be committed to being in process with each other? And do we respect diverse perspectives? So just want to name those. And then, yeah, speaking to sociocracy specifically, sociocracy is not the only type of collaborative governance, which is the one I am most familiar with. And of the ones that I have experienced, I feel like this one has a lot of really useful tools that you can adapt to a lot of different situations. I like to say that sociocracy is not an out-of-the-box solution. It's very adaptable. It's very customizable to the situation. So sociocracy means socio, which means those who associate, and ocracy is governance. So those who associate govern together. And so there's this like peer governance idea. And it's based on these 3 pillars. So consent, we're not seeking perfect agreement from everyone, but we want everything that we decide to be in everybody's range of tolerance. Transparency, really encouraging communication between groups across the organization. And then feedback, doing constant review of our processes, of each other, of individual work circles, of the organization as a whole, so that we're constantly learning together. And there's a motto in sociocracy we use: good enough for now, safe enough to try. So often as we're making a decision, we ask, is it good enough for now? Is it safe enough to try? And that's something that helps us move forward, so we're not so stuck on trying to find the perfect solution all the time. And I wanted to mention, if you have questions as we are moving through, go ahead and type those in the chat, and there'll be a couple of moments where I stop the presentation and we can go through some questions together. So I wanted to show this slide just to mention some different types of governance. I won't spend a ton of time here, but pretty interesting stuff. So autocracy is kind of that top-down, very hierarchical mode, sort of used in a lot of corporate spaces, probably the military spaces as well, as Sage was mentioning. Democracy, we've experienced some of that together here in the US, and even though it might be shifting a little bit toward the autocracy mode. And like I said, there's the potential in majority rules voting for that divisiveness, which we see between the 2 political parties in this country right now. No governance system, so that might be anarchy. That might be a new group that's forming and they're trying to figure out how their leadership structures work. That can be good in some situations and not so great in others. Whole group consensus. So this is a situation where you make decisions as a plenary, which means like everybody in the organization is there to make decisions. And that's good because you're hearing a lot of voices, but it can take a lot of time. There's not clear always who has authority over what. And so that can be difficult for the group to move forward and make decisions because of how many people are involved in every meeting. And then there's sociocracy, which focuses on consent rather than consensus. We break it into more manageable group sizes with the circles, and we're trying to make effective, clear decisions that are based on relationality. So just as a super broad overview, those are the different types of governance that exist and how sociocracy relates to them. So, okay, how do we start? Sounds great, but what does this actually look like in practice? And yeah, actually, yeah, let's just close our eyes again and maybe really bringing our bodies into this moment. So thinking for yourself as you're sitting with your body, how do you want to feel when you're leaving a meeting? Just getting curious about how it would feel in your body to be inspired, to be excited, to feel like, wow, we did a good job today. Just really feeling into how that might feel to you. And then getting curious about how you want to feel about the other people in your organization when you leave a meeting. How do you want to relate to them? How do you want to feel like there's trust, there's strength in those bonds that you're building? Just feeling where that lands in your body, just getting curious about that. And just knowing that understanding how these things feel in your body can help you name them in the group space and help you recognize where the tensions are and where the inspiration is. And giving your body a model of what to look for, what feels good as you're moving through these spaces. And just remembering that we're not doing any of this alone. We have to collaborate together to get anything done. We have a big world to make resilient. It's a big project. We need a lot of help. And returning to your breath. Just opening your eyes. Okay, so getting into some of the practical things. How do we actually foster that sense that you felt in your body of inspiration, of excitement, of effectiveness? So one of the biggest tools in sociocracy is to have these conversation rounds. So in a situation where you have a meeting, you're maybe making a proposal and then you're asking for clarity. So we're building that consensus reality, that shared reality as a group. So we do a question round first. And so the facilitator will call on each person and you're welcome to pass, but give you the opportunity to ask questions about the proposal and really, answer those questions, hear them out. And then the other thing and then we'll do, after all the questions are answered, then we do that reaction round. So how does this feel in your body? What's your gut check on this? What's the temp check? Do you feel good about this? Do you feel bad about this? Why? So that's part of what the reaction rounds are. And then we do a consent round. So do you object to this or do you consent to this? And I'll talk a little bit more about how that actually looks in practice. And the reason that we do this is oftentimes what creates some of the most tension in a meeting is when there are two people who keep going back and forth in the conversation and they're not giving space for other people to speak. So going in these conversation, or I've also heard them called council rounds, can really help to break up that energy and make sure that we're hearing from all the voices in the room. It also helps people trust that their voice will be heard. So they have this opportunity to know that they don't have to raise their hand. The turn will come around to them. The facilitator is paying attention to who's gone and who hasn't gone. And so there's this trust that they'll be able to get to speak. And yeah, it just makes it clearer who's talking, what information we need, how we need to go through. So it kind of becomes second nature. It becomes quick and effective. So that's the first tool that Sociocracy offers. And then we have this meeting structure. So some of this you might be familiar with. So we start with a check-in. So that helps, again, build that relational shared reality of what kind of energy are we even dealing with in the room today. That's really important. The facilitator might change their tactics depending on what the energy in the room is. And then we're also just building that relationality and that trust with each other. We can be a little bit vulnerable, like say I actually have a headache today. I'm kind of operating at 50%. And then you just know that. And then you can all just hold a little bit of space for that person. Or like, hey, I have so much energy. And people are like, great. And we can maybe put a couple extra things on your plate. So it's just good to know what that's going on in the room. So then you might do your report backs, your announcements. So that's like who has to leave early. Maybe there's something going on everyone needs to know about. And then action item review. Pretty standard meeting stuff. Then we can do a consent round to consent to the agenda. So ideally the agenda is created before the meeting, and then you offer it either in an email before the meeting or at the meeting. And we just want to ask for consent if this feels like a good agenda. If people want to reorder some things, maybe they're like, well, I'm leaving early. Can we talk about this first? So that's a good opportunity to just get all on the same page about, okay, what are we going to talk about? Do we feel good about this meeting framework? And I'll talk a little bit more later about how the agenda actually gets created and who's responsible for that. But then as I was talking about, we have these, if we have a proposal, that's something that's like really, really fleshed out and like really ready to go, like we're ready to decide on this, then we'll do the question round, we'll do the reaction round, we'll do the consent round. Or maybe it's just a discussion. Maybe it's just an exploration like, hey, I'm bringing this to the group for the first time. This is a totally new idea. I'm just trying to figure out like, do people even like this idea? Should I keep pursuing it? Should I bring it back to the next meeting as a proposal? So that would be called an exploration in sociocracy. So we might do a question round and a reaction round. And then whoever brought the topic is like, okay, I'll go back and I'll make a proposal about it. Or you know what? I'm just going to drop it because it doesn't seem like people are very excited about that. Then you have a backlog review. So these are things that like, okay, we didn't have time to talk about this at the last meeting. We're going to put it in the backlog and we'll pull that in if there's extra time. Stuff, action item read back. And then what's really key for me, another really important tool that Sociocracy offers is meeting feedback at the end. So if this is a chance for everyone to go in around again, to offer some feedback to the facilitator to say like, hey, this went really well. Hey, this maybe didn't go so well, or feedback to the whole group. So, wow, that meeting was a little bit tense. I'm struggling as I'm leaving. Or, hey, I feel really great, feel really inspired. And this again is an opportunity for us to leave understanding everyone's position in the reality, So we're continuing to create and build that shared reality together. I don't know if you've ever left a meeting and went like, oh, that didn't feel good, but then you have no place to talk about it. So that meeting feedback at the end, saving 5 to 10 minutes to make sure that that can really happen, that's really what helps the organization grow and move forward together. So that's one of my favorite things about Sociocracy. And I have a little video here. It's 2.5 minutes that will kind of go through what all of this looks like in practice, so that you can kind of just feel it for yourself. And let me share so that the sound comes through. Okay, looking good. So let me let's the screen again. Okay.
Okay, next on the agenda is Luciano, and he's got something for us on the learning stipend. Luciano?
Yeah, thank you, Anna. Well, as you know, I'm an advocate of this issue. The present learning stipend is 500. Many people use it, and it's not enough. Many people don't use it, I have to say, but for people who use it, it seems a lot, but it's not. So the proposal is to raise it from 500 to 750, and that's a bit. That's all. That's the proposal.
Thanks, Luciano.
Check.
Was that proposal clear for everybody? Do we have any questions on that? All right, let's do a reaction round then. This time, let's go Lizzie and then Adam, and then I'll go, and then Michael, and we'll all finish with Luciano. Lizzie?
Yeah, I think it's really exciting and useful, and I feel like it will help people find some more valuable courses to help them. Check.
Thanks, Lizzie. Adam, and then I'll go.
Yeah, I mean, like we were talking about it last meeting, the financials look good for it. All the people who weren't using it kind of cover the people who are going to use some extra, so that's great from my end. And I'm looking forward to taking a couple extra courses that I got my eye on. So check.
Great, thanks. Yeah, same. I think it's a good idea. I know we talked about that we've got room in the budget for it, so I think it's great. So check. Michael?
Yeah, thank you for putting this together. I feel like it's really clear and it'll be good for our circle and for the org.
All right, and Luciano?
Yeah, just glad that it went through. Nothing to add. Thank you.
All right, then let's do a consent round, and we'll go same order: Lizzie, Adam, me, Michael, and then Luciano. So Lizzie?
Yep, consent.
Great. Adam?
I consent.
I consent as well. Michael?
I consent.
And Luciano?
Let me think about it. I think I'll consent, yeah.
All right. Well, then it sounds like we'll be good with moving from that 500 to 750 a year.
Okay, so that gives you kind of a feel for how that shows up in practice. And I just want to name that this is a pretty simple, straightforward example. It only took them 2.5 minutes to get through this topic, which is not super typical. It does get easier as you move through to kind of go through the rounds. And you can imagine the more people you have in a circle, the longer these topics take, because you're getting all of the reactions. And so typically each circle has between 4 and 10 people in it to really have enough space for everyone to speak during the rounds. And I'll talk more about how those circles get made here in a minute. And a few more slides, and then we'll go through questions for a little bit, and then move on to the rest of the presentation here. So give me a moment, just one more time to share. Okay, so as you might have noticed, there were a couple different roles going on in the meeting there. So the most obvious role is the facilitator. That person facilitates the rounds. They keep tabs on the energy of the group. They restate the proposals if there's a modification, and they're just there to keep everybody on task. So that's what the facilitator is moving through. Also really important that they kind of note when, like, okay, I'm not speaking as a facilitator right now. Okay, I am speaking as a facilitator right now, kind of a thing. The thing that was maybe not so obvious, the secretary, someone to keep notes. That's another person who would assist in the agenda creation before the meeting. Then they'd also do backlog management, and they might keep time for the meeting, or you might have that as a separate role if that's important. The navigator, also sometimes called the leader of the circle, is very hard to see sometimes. So the navigator is someone who's selected, and ideally each of these roles are selected, which we'll talk a little bit more about later. So the navigator is someone who's kind of focusing on the big picture of the circle. Like, is this circle achieving its aim, its goal here? And then they're responsible for the review processes of the group. They also are the one who helps create the agenda ahead of time. And then if there are circles that they're related to, that they're communicating with, then they're one of the two people who is going to bring information back to the other circle. Similarly, the delegate in a paired circle situation is going to offer reports to that linked circle. They're going to listen really attentively, and they are also a selected position, ideally. So I'll talk a little bit more about how that communication flow works in a later slide, but just to give you a little overview of that for now. And then want to offer that in the example that I showed, everyone consented. It was really easy, and went through. But sometimes people are like, you know what, this is not safe enough to try. This is not good enough for now. And I think that this would be counterproductive to our circle's aim, our circle's goal. And so we like to say in Sociocracy that objections are a gift. And it's really saying to the group, like, hey, I know that this is important to us, but I really think we should think about this differently. I'm objecting for this reason. And in objections, and this kind of like going a little deeper into the training, but in objections, you really want to do another question round. Like, does everyone understand the objection? Can you explain your reason for your objection, and then have a reaction round for that objection? And the objection is not the responsibility of the person who objects. It's actually the group's responsibility to really think through, like, what does this objection mean, and how do we move through it? And so some opportunities for integrating those objections, you might modify the proposal. Like, okay, you feel really good about this half of the proposal, but maybe not this half of the proposal. Is it possible to modify it so that you feel good? And it's really important not to like target the person who's made the objection too much, but really like source information from the group about like, okay, how can we solve this problem together? Sometimes this can't be done during the meeting. Sometimes you might create a temporary subcommittee to go and work on the objection together and come back with a new proposal. The person who objected is usually on that committee to kind of work through that and add some energy to that. But sometimes you can resolve it in the meeting as well. So you might shorten the length of the proposal. So you might say like, okay, well, maybe we don't want to do this indefinitely, but okay, what if we did it for 3 months instead of a year, or something like that, that can help to try it out, to measure how it's working, and then bring it back in 3 months to kind of reevaluate it as a group. You could make it safer in some way, like, okay, how about we we adjust it slightly so that it feels a little safer to the person who's objecting. And then as kind of like a last resort, you can drop the proposal. Ideally in Sociocracy, we're really trying to make decisions together. We're experimenting. We're really just trying to, as an organization, you're trying to make changes to your reality, and you can't do that if you're not making decisions. And so really trying not to drop proposals, but thinking creatively together for solutions that feel good enough for now and safe enough to try. So before I go into this next section, talks more about circle structures, I just want to stop and see if anybody has questions for me right now, curiosities after watching that little meeting video, or just like things that are coming up for you. I was like, how would this actually happen? You can raise your hand or raise your hand in Zoom, either way. Ryan.
Yeah, so I'm curious about whether you have experience or cases where scale becomes a factor, because it does seem to be, a process where everybody is included incrementally, like, you go through the rounds. And as you mentioned, that typically optimizes at 4 to 10 people, right? So I'm imagining a community that is making decisions on making impactful decisions within the circles that impact the rest of the community in some way. you know, so is there a way for things to build up into kind of a higher structure where you, like, the circle decides that a proposal is a good idea and then they take it up a level and include more people, or how does that work? That's kind of
Yeah, so that's actually the second half of the presentation. So for the most part, I'll let that answer it. But yeah, this scales really as high up as you want to go. I've seen organizations that have 100+ people who are using Sociocracy, and really you just have many different circles. So each circle really kind of caps out at 4 to 10, but then it means you need another circle or multiple other circles. So I'll talk about that more, but it really, the key point is that each circle has its own domain. And I'll talk about that in a little bit too, but they have their own situation where they have more authority than anyone else in the organization on a particular thing. And each circle has its own domain. And so that's how they're making decisions. But I'll talk a little bit more about that in the second half. And then if you still have questions, we can come back to that. Brett.
I think this is a simple, quick one. It's going back to the elements of the meeting, that chart. You don't need to go back to it, but so generally decisions, as some of us know, Andra knows, are made for a period of time to be revisited and continued or modified or changed or eliminated, whatever. Where does that fit in it? Is that part of backlog?
Yeah, so yeah, this is a little bit like of an advanced topic, but this is great. I love it. So in sociocracy, we have policies. So that's something that, like, okay, as a group, we've made a decision that this is just standard practice. Like maybe we have a policy that, you know, in a community, quiet hours are between 10 p.m. and 8 a.m. And that's a policy we have. So we would set a time on that policy, maybe a year. Let's reevaluate it in a year, see if it's still working for people, if we need to change it. And so you would put that sort of on your policy log, which can be a part of your agenda, or, you know, that's something that the navigator of the circle or the leader of the circle would keep track of and say, like, okay, we hit our year mark. We're going to put this as a review item on our agenda. So it would be really similar to the Explorer. It would be like an exploration. So you do a question round, like, does everyone understand this policy? Does everyone, you know, what is your reaction to, is this policy working for us? And then if you need to modify it in some way, then you do a consent round. And then also there is a template in Sociocracy for performance review, and you can adapt that for policy review. So in that regard, it's like, hey, what's working well about this? And everyone goes around and says that. What needs to improve about this, and everyone goes around about that. And then what's our improvement plan for going forward? And then there's a consent round. So that performance review you could use for an individual, for a policy, for a circle, or for the organization. So that's like a really adaptable template, and that would just be kind of an agenda item as well. Really, really similar to their explorations. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, quick clarification, because I understand, I see some different terms from the way I learned it, which I understand the difference in terms.
Yeah.
The way I learned it, it would be the secretary who would be keeping track and bringing things back. And you mentioned the leader or the navigator. Is there a different way that people are doing it now from what I learned years ago?
You could kind of decide that for your own organization. I do think that the policy log is typically under the secretary, but the performance reviews are under the navigator. So it just kind of depends how you want it to be that up. But
yeah, the secretary could feed it to the facilitator, leader, etc.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then bringing in your question, Eric.
Well, hey, great presentation so far. You know, I'm most curious about the less than ideal situation. I think, you know, it's noted, it's really important we structure it in a way that avoids sticky back and forths. But I also noticed that, you know, right after the presentation is probably the trickiest time for that, which is then the questions. Because the proposer will have to respond to the question in time, not at the end of the round, right? Am I misunderstanding? Like, how do you structure that? What are your thoughts on avoiding the back and forth dynamic right off the bat?
Yeah, that can be really challenging. So there's actually, Sociocracy for All offers some facilitator practice rounds. They do like role plays, and they intentionally give you really difficult ones so that you can play that out together. So yeah, if you feel as a facilitator that a back and forth starts to happen, some things that you can do are like, okay, let's take one question for each person and go around, and maybe you do multiple question rounds if it's like starting to get tense. And so as a facilitator, you kind of have to feel into that, like, okay, yeah, this person is talking a lot, they have a lot of questions, or their questions are kind of more like comments. So you can even say that, like, hey, this is a question round. Do you have a question that you want to ask in this round? And then that can kind of help people to get back on track. So that's something that I use a lot, is like, okay, let's just keep it to one question, and we'll go back around and see if anyone else has more questions. That can help keep the rounds moving, or yeah, just keep like really asking people to stick to the question round can really help with that back and forth. So, yeah, okay, and over to Ken and Janella.
Just a couple of quick comments. I appreciate the clarity of the roles. That's probably the best description I've seen before. And then I'm going to completely rip off the you describing that live example, because when I tried to explain my limited knowledge of how sociocracy can work, that's a really great little summary, so I appreciate that. And then just an apology for Ken's disappearance. He's a first responder, and the fire tones just dropped, so he had to go to that. Apologies.
No worries. Thank you for that service, and yeah, sending a lot of care that way. So thank you, and thank you for bringing that in. I love that video. I use it a lot, and Sociocracy for All has a lot of similar facilitation videos, and they talk about how to integrate objections and things, and I have a link to that at the end of the slide deck, so you can also feel free to use that. They love when people use their content, so feel free. Okay, I don't see any other questions, so I think I'm going to continue and get into some of the like scaling up from here ideas. Let me share my screen again. Okay, so talking about when you have more than one circle in an organization. All right, so some reasons you might add circles. We kind of talked about this a little bit when Ryan brought in the question, but your team has more than 10 people. You can't make effective decisions anymore because you have a lot of people. The rounds take too long. It's not going to work. Your categories of work are starting to diversify. So maybe, okay, we have this aim as a group to, we really want to focus on these community gardens, but okay, part of that community garden is outreach. So maybe we have an outreach team and we have a community garden team, for instance. Or you have team members with specific interests. So like, I really want to work on grants. I don't want to work on outreach, maybe. So then you're like, okay, maybe it makes sense to start having different circles. Or the bandwidth varies among the team. Like maybe someone's like, well, I can really only help with this thing. I don't have time to help with this thing. So maybe they're on one circle and not another circle. So those are some reasons why you might add them. When you're starting to form new circles, you ask yourself these questions. So the vision and the mission are something that's organization-wide. The aim and domain are specific to individual circles. So the vision is the biggest version of your idea of what you as an organization want to get done, because you've come together because you want to get something done. So what is that thing? And what would the world look like if everyone did this? So really, really big pie in the sky. What is the vision? And this is sort of the unattainable goal in like Buddhist philosophy of like, we know we can't fix the whole world, but we're going to try. And so what is the small piece of how we can try? But we need to know that vision first. So the mission is bringing that down just a little bit. What part of the vision does your team want to focus on? And so, okay, well, the world would be great if everyone did this, but okay, let's limit it to this geographic area maybe, just to make that a little of a smaller scale. And the aim is, how will your team accomplish the mission? Because, okay, there's the mission, that sounds great, but how are we going to do that? So that's where, individual circles come into play. So the outreach team is going to, maybe they have an aim of like, we're going to help people learn about ecological restoration so that they can go do this in their community and they can learn about our organization, which will help our mission, right? But the grants team is going to say, well, our goal is to get this organization funded so that more people will learn about ecological restoration, or whatever you're working on. And then the domain is the authority that the circle has how they can make decisions, what they can make decisions on. And ideally, there's not gaps or overlaps in domain between circle to circle. So ideally, it's pretty clear who has authority over what. You don't want to have, like something that might happen is like, okay, who's in charge of the website? If there's two circles that have the website in their domain, then they might argue about who has control over what on the website. So it's really important that the domains are clear so that everyone knows what they can make decisions on. And so some examples here. This is just kind of an ecological example here. So a world where everyone has access to potable water. So that's our like biggest picture version of it. And the mission, bringing it a little closer to regenerate our watershed such that the water is more drinkable. So bringing that down in scale a little bit, what is the piece of the vision that we can work on? That's our mission. So an aim for a particular circle might be to organize volunteers to engage in ecological restoration for the watershed. So this would be like a volunteer coordination circle, and that's their aim. That's how they're contributing to the mission. That's how they're getting the mission done in their own way. And so their domain, the things that they can make decisions over without consulting other circles, is volunteer coordination, outreach, planting, soil testing, water testing. Those are the purviews for the circle. That's kind of like how that would look in practice. And so again, the vision and the mission are organization wide. The aim and domain are for each individual circle. Each individual circle will have their own aim and domain, and it will be different. So just to show you an example of how this structure could look. So this is just a really simple example. So each of these little dots is like theoretically a person. So in Sociocracy, you typically have a general circle or a coordination circle. This is actually the place where communication flows. Decisions are not ideally made in the general circle. They're made in these lower child circles. So really trying to do subsidiarity, distributed power, so making the decisions at the lowest possible level where people are directly interacting with whatever the work actually is. So the mission circle is often like what other organizations might call the board of directors. They're really thinking about big picture. They're thinking about, are we accomplishing our mission? How are we integrating with the rest of the world? How are we interfacing with legal entities and other organizations? They're kind of that outward facing team, but they have the same amount of power as everyone else in the organization. But they also have a domain. So their domain is like, legal issues are our domain. So we have more control over the legal issues of the organization than anyone else in the organization. Similarly, if this was the outreach team, they have more control over outreach than anyone else in the organization. So in that way, Sociocracy is not actually fully non-hierarchical because it's really contextually hierarchical, or it's a circular hierarchy. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. And then these little dots here that are touching the circles, that's the double linking I was talking about. And so basically one of these is the leader or the navigator of the circle. One of them is the delegate. So the delegate is part of this circle, but they're going to attend the general circle meetings to report back on the decisions that were made and take information back to the child circle. The leader or the navigator is actually part of the general circle, but they're bringing, information back to the child circle. They're reporting to the general circle about what's going on. And then you have these 2 points of contact. So you're not relying on just one person to get information. You have 2 people. So you have kind of a backup and you're preventing bias. I do want to say that, especially in smaller organizations, double linking is pretty tough because that means that there's 2 people who have to attend 2 meetings. So I've seen a lot of people do single linking instead. It's not ideal, but it works. And that's kind of like where you just have to adapt to what your organization has capacity for at any given moment. So with this one, we have a branching circle. So this one might be, maybe this is the website team, and the website team actually breaks down into, okay, you respond to incoming emails or like, info requests, contact forms, and then you are actually doing like the tech details and changes on the website. So, and then they would report to this greater website team where they make decisions about how the website works together. So that's one example of how that may look. Just to go a little deeper into the difference between the general circle and the mission circle, sometimes this gets a little tricky for folks. So the general circle is ideally just receiving information. They're just doing report backs. They're not making decisions at that level as much as possible. And they're the ones who approve the delegates. They send the leaders. They might create new child circles that are attached directly to the general circle. Any circle can make a new circle off of itself, but the general circle is the one that makes kind of like a whole new branch. And they go through that same proposal, question, comment, consent round process when you're creating a new circle. The mission circle, keeping track of the organization mission, interacting with external entities, and focusing on the big picture. So those are the differences there. Then, as I talked about double linking a little bit, so the leader and the delegate, or the navigator and the delegate, are selected positions. I'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like in a minute. But yeah, it allows for 2 points of contact, and then the relevant circles will provide feedback to each of these roles on a predefined timeline. So maybe these people are selected for a year, and at that point we say like, hey, is this working? What's working about this? What's not working about this? Do you want to continue in this role? Do we all consent to continuing in this role? And moving from there. And as I mentioned, double linking can be tricky for organizations. So there's different options. You can do single linking or kind of liaison, which is similar to single linking, I think. But yeah, it just kind of depends on what your organization has capacity for. And I just want to review meeting roles here, just so that you understand that the navigator and the delegate are the ones that are part of that double linking. So now that you know a little bit more about what double linking is, the navigator and the delegate are really responsible for those communication flows in the organization. And yeah, I think that's what it.
Andra froze. I'm just thinking that she once said that sometimes under the last point of secretary is the timekeeper sometimes is a separate role. I don't know if she was going to say that here. Oh, come back, Andra. She's stuck. Uh-oh. I hope she knows it.
She's just giving us plenty of time to read this screen. I'm sure that's all it is. I wish.
Oh, she dropped off. Here she comes. She's coming back.
It's been a great presentation, though, so far while we're waiting for.
Yeah.
In this, I'm very impressed.
We're impressed.
Thank you. So my power just went out.
Oh no.
So
power went out.
I will just give me a second here and I'll kind of put up what I had prepared for you, and we can just take questions and comments from here. Can everyone hear me okay?
You're on your phone now,
right.
I take it, on your phone battery?
I am on my phone battery, yeah. Give me just a second, I will get these headphones on. Thank you. This is crazy. I was like, okay, everyone can still hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, great, perfect. Okay, let me walk over here for a second. It's also really dark in my office now, so you couldn't see me.
Wow.
Okay, well, just for fun, real quick, this is my bunny. Yay!
There's a bunny.
Okay, this is such an adventure. Yeah, so I think I was just talking about meeting roles, and we have the leader and the delegate. So just to kind of finish up those thoughts, I want to talk a little bit about the selection process. So when you're going and you're selecting someone, it's similar to the way you would do a proposal or an exploration, but basically you want to name as a group all of the qualifications that that person needs to fulfill that role. So you want to understand what is needed in the role. So what does this person do? What's the role description? And you come up with that together as a group. And then you decide, okay, what kind of person would we want to fill this role? And those are the qualifications. And then you want to decide the terms. How long will they hold this role for? So in the case of, say, the facilitator, you probably want a facilitator for between 3 months to a year before you switch facilitators. That gives you a lot of consistency and gives them comfort in the role before they transition into something else. And yeah, so you have the qualifications, the role description, and the the terms are the three big things there. And then when you're actually doing the nomination and selection process, you I'm like doing this not with my notes, so just bear with me for a little bit. I'm almost done. But so you can nominate yourself during the nominations, and they're very transparent. Like in Sociocracy, everything's very transparent. And so you're like, okay, I nominate so and so because they fit this qualification that we named, and I think that's really important. I want to give them a shot, whatever you want to say. So you're saying not only who you're voting for, but your reason why. And you go around and everyone says that, and the facilitator is tallying it up. And then there's a change round. So if based on what you heard from the reasons why people are nominating other people, then you might want to change your vote. You might decide like, hey, that was a really good reason. I'm going to change my vote from this person to this person. And that again allows for a lot of transparency. And what you will find in the processes is that people will be surprised, like, oh, I didn't know that people thought of me that way. That's really nice. And so again, it's creating that shared reality and gives us people a little bit of feedback on like, oh, it's nice to know that people think of me this way. And often people who might not have nominated themselves, but you can do in Sociocracy, be like, you know what, I really like the idea of this role. I really want to be in that role, and offer that as an option, which often will make people change their votes. Like, oh, well, if you want to do it, then sure, you. But yeah, so it's just really good to be building that shared reality together. And so after the change round, you tally up again, and then you do a consent round. Like, does everyone consent to this person filling this role for this period of time, and including the person who is selected, because they have to say like, can I do this, right? So do I also consent to it or no? And then you go to the person who has the next many tally marks and so on and so forth. That's kind of how the selection process would work ideally.
So, I don't mean to interrupt, but I do have something important to say. I have your slides here. I'm happy to share my screen, and
Oh,
let
okay.
me know when to switch the next slide.
Yeah, actually, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, let me help you out there. Okay.
Good thinking, Ryan.
See, this is why I email things ahead of time. Great.
Are you guys?
Okay.
Is that visible?
Yeah, it is visible. That's kind of near the end of the slide deck, so maybe you could go to the selection process. Okay, yeah, so after the selection process.
All right. And just
Thank you.
say next.
Super helpful.
Yep.
So yeah, next slide. Thanks. Perfect. So yeah, I just also really want to reiterate how important feedback is. So feedback in Sociocracy is really, really a key point here. So thinking about the meeting feedback at the end of the meetings, I think is the most critical piece. The performance review for each role that is held in the meeting and also in the circle. And you have meeting roles and then you have operational roles. So the meeting roles are, helping to facilitate the meeting directly, and the operational roles are like, maybe, okay, you are specifically the grant manager, and so you need to meet these certain deadlines, requirements, reporting, things of that nature. So you would review ideally both the meeting roles and the operational roles at that point. Regular feedback for individual circles. So maybe every 2 years or something, the individual circle would do a review process for itself, or another circle can do the review process just to like name like what's going well, what's not going well, how do we learn from that? And then similarly, you can do an organization-wide performance review. Next slide. And I also just want to focus for a moment on really what I love about Sociocracy is that it's trying to be equitable, it's trying to bring in diverse voices, and so really want to be as inclusive as possible. So as a facilitator, you might invite nonverbal meeting gestures, which I can talk about in a minute. You might pause to give people some time to gather their thoughts. So you're really embracing a variety of communication styles. You might open with a grounding exercise to really help everyone's nervous system settle. And this helps everyone, not just people who are neurodivergent or have different communication styles, but really just inviting us all into a comfortable space so we can actually collaborate and be on the same team together. Next slide.
Hold on. Let's do that. Okay.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. So these are meeting gestures that I actually pulled off of the Occupy website, because these are actually used in consensus, but I think they're really good to just name. They're kind of fun for increasing participation in meetings and reducing the amount of talking that happens in meetings. So that can help with keeping with the time. And so you might have seen like the twinkle fingers or up twinkles, I've heard it called. That's like, hey, I really agree with what was said. Another one that I really like is yeah, the heart is obviously really cute, but just some ways that you can invite people to explore. Some of these don't apply to sociocracy, but some of them are really helpful, and I like to use them in my meetings. So just giving ways for people to participate that aren't necessarily verbal is helpful for different communication styles. Next slide.
I just insert that I think the direct response, it would be useful non-verbally. It's like if there's a whole queue, but you want to give a direct response. Yeah.
Yeah, so that one really want to be used sparingly, because that can cause those back and forths that we were talking about. But it's really helpful if you're like, oh, I have really important information about what that person just said, and it would be really helpful for the whole group to know. So that, yeah, that direct response. Can't do it right now because I'm holding my phone, but Julie did it pretty well. So yeah. And Julie, do you remember the Vibes Watch one? Can you do the Vibe Watch one? Yeah, so that one, yeah. So you put your two fingers together. That one's like, hey, there's some tension in the room. Maybe the facilitator can bring us back on track so we can diffuse that tension. I love that one. That was my favorite. So yeah, just want to talk a little bit about like, where do you go from here? What are some little things you can do now to start with this process? So really starting meetings with check-ins, doing meeting feedback at the end, and practicing those conversational rounds can really start to bring this culture, because it really is a culture that you're bringing into your organization. You can identify the meetings that you already have. Like, do you already have working circles? You don't want to really try to make more meetings for yourself if you can help it. So getting really curious about like, what circles do we already have, and what are their aims and their domains, and do we want to just elect roles there? And so just getting curious about that. And then determining right now who has the power to make decisions in your organization, and what do they need to feel safe transitioning to a more shared powered framework. And so that can be a really, really gentle process, and really just getting curious about like, what do you need? What are your fears? Just be really gentle and curious about that, because you need to have that like very careful, balanced transition of power for this to succeed well. And so, yeah, so we just wanted to name that, and we can go to the next slide. So as a consultant, I want to help you facilitate this. It sounds like you might be interested, so I just want to offer a little bit of a framework about what that might look like. So there would be a process of gathering information about your organization and what the current power dynamics are, so that I can help with that transition. And then I would do some of that power and needs mapping. So having that really gentle conversation with the people who are already in power and making decisions about, you know, what would it look like to shift this over? Are there ways that you've tried to do this before and it didn't succeed? Is there some kind of organizational conflict that we need to address first? So that would be something that I would kind of help with. And in that way, I've kind of thought about this as like organizational counseling or therapy even. Sometimes there's just some things that we need to go through and clear the air about so that we can move forward in a different way. Then there would be help with drafting a governance agreement and an implementation plan. We would create an implementation circle. So there would be some people in your organization that are really trying to make this happen, and doing some studying, getting some training about how to actually facilitate this process. Developing the circle structures from your existing meeting groups. So again, I don't want you to have a whole ton of extra meetings, really trying to build and transition from your existing structure so that it's a minimal resource requirement. And then just it would be there for ongoing implementation support and edge cases, because weird situations will come up. You're like, how do we handle this sociocratically? And so I would be there to support you in that. And next slide. And yeah, so then there's resources with links for the meeting facilitation videos through Sociocracy for All, the little hand gesture graphic that I put up, some agenda templates that are really helpful, also from Sociocracy for All. And then I am doing this work by donation right now. And so I just threw up my Patreon in case you are curious about that. It has other things that I'm working on, including some of the books that I've written. So if you want to check that out, that would be great. And yeah, you can stop at this slide share now. Thank you so much. That was helpful. Okay, great. And then, yeah, I want to bring in opportunities for discussions and questions. Yeah, how are you feeling like this would work for you? What are you nervous about? Just, yeah, just really opening it up for your voices. And Will, looks like you have a question.
Willie has his hand up there. You might not see it on your phone.
Yeah,
Oh,
I do.
yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I'm just wondering how this process relates to the Quakers and how the Quakers do things.
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with the Quakers. I think that there were some Quaker influences in how sociocracy was developed. It didn't really go into the history of it, but I believe that there was a school in the Netherlands that in the 1930s that was using this sort of process, like a version of this, to do co-learning curriculums with the teachers and the students. And there was an engineer who was in that school who then kind of took it and adapted it and really became what it is now as sociocracy in about the 1980s in the Netherlands. And I do believe, I can't remember at what point the Quaker influences came in, but I think there's a little bit of that here. And yeah, I would definitely would love to learn more. So if you know more about that, I would welcome your voice.
Okay, thanks.
I'll just add that my
Brad.
recollect, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Real quickly, I just add that I think it was a Quaker school, and the person who originally, the engineer who owned the company, Gerard Ehrenberg or something like that. I think he was, I think he was a Quaker associated with that. And maybe he'd even gone to that school as a child. Anyway, something like that. But it is
Yeah.
rooted in Quaker principles, rooted. Anyway, as I
Yeah,
understand.
thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah, that is helpful. I do want to name that one of my friends who is very curious about Quaker methodologies, especially for meetings, told me this phrase that in the meetings they court the silence. And I've really been trying to bring that into my practices of just like, what does it mean to court the silence, to allow for silence to be a part of the meeting, for silence to even be an active participant in the meeting. And so, yeah, I've been getting really curious about that. And also in some of the communities that I'm part of, they have a seat for the land in the meeting. So they have like an empty chair that's representative of the land. So every time they go in a round, they offer a moment of silence when they get to the land so that they can all close their eyes and imagine what the land might be reacting or what the questions the land might have for this proposal. So yeah, I thought that was an interesting practice as well. And Eric.
It's funny you guys mentioned that. I was wondering earlier, I've seen a great technique in meetings to ensure everybody pauses for a moment after someone says something, just so that it lands. Have you tried that in sociocratic circles, especially running large agendas? How does that work? Do you recommend it?
Definitely recommend it. I've found that there are some types of brains that really need a moment to collect their own thoughts before they start listening to other people's thoughts. And sometimes the rounds can give a little bit of pressure to like, oh, I have to think on my feet. And so, yeah, offering just like, okay, maybe like after the proposal is introduced, everyone just has a moment to collect their own thoughts. Maybe it could be 30 seconds, it could be a minute, whatever works for your group. But really feeling into that as a facilitator. And that way, maybe, everyone has a piece of paper and they're just jotting down a couple thoughts so that they can really be active listeners when they're hearing the proposal. And I will say that a lot of the people that I work with at the Sociocracy for All level are international and often really want to get things done, move through things pretty quickly. And I tend to be slower. I tend to bring us back to our bodies, do a lot of breathing, even just like it can be really helpful if there's a lot of tension in the circle to just say like, okay, everybody, let's just take a breath. Let's take a breath, clear the tension and just name it. Like naming it goes a really long way to reducing the fatigue that we feel in our bodies and our nervous system when there's tension in a room. So there's all kinds of ways as a facilitator that you can bring that in. And that's definitely something I would do as I was training other facilitators is to pause to bring in that silence. So yeah, thank you for naming that. Yeah, any other questions or discussion? Really just want to open up to like, yeah, how are you feeling? How's this landing for you?
I have another question.
Yeah, please.
I have another scaling question. I don't know if you have numbers on like where things break down in terms of how many circles, are too many, or when people start to feel left out of the process, on decisions made by a circle that impacts the entire community and that kind of thing. Um, and I'm fine if it breaks down at a point because from the research I've done, small communities generally cap out about 150, 200 people, self-governed communities, right? So that number is important, but I wonder if you have some insight on that.
Yeah, so I believe that the recommendation is to not have more than 4 branches coming off of the general circle. So those can subdivide quite a few times, but that helps with the communication flow. So if you're subdividing circles, then and you get to the point where you might have a 5th circle off of the general circle, then you might need another kind of general circle type entity that's going to hold like a whole set of things. So that can help with the scaling, is that you have kind of another coordination circle that is accounting for that. And I've seen this work with organizations of a couple hundreds of people, and I believe that like some of my instructors have been working with even larger numbers. And something that happens is they have, and I'm still learning about this, so just forgive me on that front, but this is like super, super advanced stuff. There's a help desk circle that can help to, like if you're like, I really don't know which circle this proposal needs to go to, they can go to that help desk circle, and that can kind of like help people orient to the overall structure. Because once it starts to get to a certain level of scale, like it's hard for people to understand and wrap their heads around. And then the other thing that I've noticed is that when you have these circles with really, really specific domains, like, you have a website circle maybe, and then you have like a permaculture circle, and there's people who are serving on 2 different circles that are like wildly far away from each other in the organizational structure. That can also really help to create more cohesion in the organization, because there's people who have different vision onto different pieces of the organization. And I also think, I haven't talked about this, but I think it's really important that not everyone serves on every circle. Like if you have someone who's in every circle, that can really become a problem. And it might indicate that there's a difficult time in trusting the decisions that are being made and trusting the communication flows. So just allowing that, like, maybe take your top 3 circles or something, that so that there is that ability to have shared power in the space, and just to name that in. But yeah, it's definitely something that I believe can scale, and I'm not sure like exactly the number that it might cap out on, but there's definitely like experiments in process to see.
It's a
how
matter
that
of like degrees of separation, right? Like, if you go beyond, 3 degrees of separation down, the graph of groups, then you start to break down a little bit because, those perimeter circles are doing things that are in some way disconnected from the whole, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing that I've actually heard my instructors say is that it might mean that we shouldn't have organizations that large, that maybe they are separate organizations at that point, and like how are they relating to each other, and that actually can help with that distributed power and help people still experience agency. If okay, actually, we have such different aims, that maybe we are 2 separate organizations, and just acknowledging that can actually build out those structures a little bit better. So that's also a big question, and I'm not sure that I would put any like, oh, we shouldn't do anything. I don't like shoulds, but it's just something to think about. It's like maybe that's the point at which we are different organizations, because we're actually trying to make different changes on reality.
Well, yeah, so that's building a sustainable model for a community that's self-governed and has equanimity built into it. Some other research that I've been reading suggests that it really is kind of a small number, relatively speaking, of units that operate efficiently in this way. And that's not a bad thing. It's something to kind of just plan around.
For sure.
Yeah.
Right. Awesome. Well, I'm not seeing any direct questions right now. Okay, Julie. Yeah, go for it.
I think I'm going to skip the question I wrote in there about async reporting versus meeting, but yeah, Brad's. I want to actually. I'm having a response to Brad's post there in the chat. And what is it? Okay, here it is. If we want, but one of the benefits or functions of sociocracy is to affect the people that are include in decision making the people that are most affected, then and we want to be a very large network someday. I mean, we should be asking questions about being too small right now, but so let's see, for New American Resilient Communities, I think this is Brad's chat, that the numbers of people would need to be far less than 100 to 150 people in any near term, because there are not many people with the necessary consciousness, and we all have a lot to learn. So I think small is beautiful. And I don't know, help me with the thought that I'm having here, somebody, either Andrew or Brad. Is there a conflict there?
Yeah, well, I think like what you're saying is really interesting in terms of building a network. And I think that my bioregional background coming in here a little bit, I would say like really keeping it geographical. Like, okay, what is this, circle structure in this geography? And then how does it relate to that circle structure in that geography? And that would be the way that I personally would build a network, is really focusing on who's local and who can do that organization on the ground. And that way you're keeping it like the people who are affected by the decisions you're making are all geographically close together. And so it's easier to source that feedback and that information. Curious, Brad, if you have a direct response to that, or if it's a different question.
Direct response. I don't want to cut in front of you, Janella, but just a direct response on that, a quick one. I could imagine, I'm saying actual residential communities. I personally think small is beautiful, for a lot of reasons to start with. Maybe they can grow over time. However, I also think that networks of small residential resilient communities in a similar area, around Eugene or whatever, could be bigger, and that's how I see more people integrating together. So that's all.
Thank you, Brad. And Janella.
I can find the right buttons. All right. Implementation question. For an organization attempting this who's not done sociocracy decision making before, would you think phasing it in a way would be easier, or try to go whole hog and organize it out and try to do that?
It's really our favorite phrase in sociocracy is it depends. So
Right.
It really depends on the organization. But I would say like the phased implementation feels really good. I've seen organizations take as long as 5 years. I don't think it needs to take that long by any means, but just like to give you some expectations of like this can be a really long, slow process, because you're not just changing the meeting format, you're changing culture, and that takes time. You're teaching people how to care about each other. You're teaching people how to do conversational turn taking. So that does take time. But I do think implementing, the meeting structure and the rounds and the meeting feedback is a really easy, like dipping your toes in sort of a situation. And then kind of building from there into having an implementation circle that's deep dive, like how do we actually do this in the organization, and doing that power mapping and really getting the people who are currently in power on board is a really important step in that implementation. And then once they say like, yes, let's do it, we feel good about it, we're going to transition power, we sanction this, we even maybe mandate it at that level. And then, okay, you start the implementation circle and you start moving through and educating. You really need to educate your organization about what it even is so they can operate inside of it, and make sure you have a couple skilled facilitators. And then you start with the implementation circle that's running sociocratically, and then you might, start circle by circle and help them start implementing those practices. Does that help? Does that feel good? Okay, great. And then I just want to answer a couple of questions I saw in the chat. So async reports, I think definitely can happen. That's just going to be organization by organization as well. And that's one of the things you can adapt based on, you know, if you start with the report backs in person and that's not working for you and you want to move async, I think that's great adaptation. So definitely experiment with that. And then does the model expect involvement from all community members? Or is this a model for a governance tier within a community? And I think that, again, it depends. So ideally, you have people who are involved. But if people are like, you know, I live in this community, but I don't feel, I trust the people who are on the circles to make decisions, and I don't feel like I need to be on the circles, then okay, that's fine. Then you just trust other people. But at the point that you're frustrated about a decision that got made in a circle, that's maybe the point at which you want to go join that circle, right? You want to actually participate in that conversation. I've seen intentional communities require that you serve on at least one circle. So, you know, that's an option as well. Yeah, and I want to notice that we have about 8 minutes left. I want to have a little round of feedback. But yeah, let's go to Brad for one last question.
Let me decide if these are important enough to take our time right now. I don't think they're that important. They're things we will get to in the learning process in the future. So I think I can drop these ones. Thank you.
Okay, and feel free to email me too anytime. I love questions. So yeah, okay, Sage.
Yeah, quick question. In your experience, what do you do if two folks in your circle have a conflicting communication style?
Yeah, really, really great question. So I would start going into sort of more conflict resolution mode. Like, okay, so, you know, what is it that, you know, help, like ask questions, get really curious about like, what is it about this communication style that's important to you? And how is that in conflict? And maybe having individual one-on-ones with those people to get curious and understand their point of view and see if there's some kind of compromise. So yeah, using any kind of conflict mediation strategies on that front, I think is what I would go to, and just seeing like what is the underlying reason for the way that they're acting the way they're acting, and helping everybody get back on the same team. Like, why are we here? What are we doing together? What do we want to accomplish? Because oftentimes it's like there's an underlying tension around like, well, we actually don't agree on what we're trying to do together, and that's why I'm acting this way. So that's hopefully that's a helpful little like there's a deep question, but, but yeah, that's one thing that you can do. So yeah.
That's an important,
Okay.
actually, that's an important question because it didn't really sort of grok like where the conflict resolution comes into, you know, circles. So maybe it's a different domain entirely that is kind of open to, you know, anyone who maybe it's something that would self-form sort of organically, contextually, depending on the situation, you know, that would.
I've heard that in sociocracy, ideally, nothing's coming out of the blue. So you kind of know because you're doing this meeting feedback process, you're doing this performance review process, you're doing a lot of feedback that eventually it's going to come out like, oh, I really had a lot of tension with that person. And so then it's like, okay, well, okay, how do we resolve that? And there can be a circle, like some of the intentional communities I've been part of has like community council where they bring that. So yeah, that's an option too. Yeah, and I do want to move into meeting feedback, so I'm going to do a round. So I'll go ahead and call on folks. And yeah, so just like, how are you feeling in your body right now? What are you excited about? And just maybe trying to keep it to like 30 to 45 seconds. And let's start with Brad.
We're doing a round. Good. Practicing rounds now. Yeah, feeling really good. As I said when you were off, and you didn't hear it, Andra, but I'm really impressed. I thought we'd begin. I thought you were going to be a beginner, and we were going to get you learning, you know, as a beginner at this, and you know, we're going to have to be patient with you. Good job. You know your stuff. I'm really appreciative of what you're bringing for us. Thank you much.
Beautiful. And over to you, Eric, and then we'll go Julie after that.
I really enjoyed this. I've had a couple of sociocracy trainings in the past, and I thought we went quickly, and that's because we covered really important core points. So at this moment, I feel like I have a great vision for, you know, both sociocracy, but also how it'll help us. So thank you.
Beautiful. Julie, and then Janella.
It's a miracle. We're doing this, hopefully. Yeah, I'm just looking forward to, implementing it. Andra is good. This is the second one of these that I've been to, and wow. Yeah. Sorry, Andra. Make you blush.
Okay, Janella, and then Ryan.
This is a fantastic overview, and I have a much better picture of exactly how I can see this working in some of the organizations I'm involved with. So I'm very excited to dig in a little bit more. I have a little bit more to be in my pack to be able to explain this to others who I've fumbled and when I tried to explain exactly how this can work beautifully. So thank you for a wonderful introduction. Thank you.
Yay, Ryan, and then Sage.
Yeah, I thought this was very informative. We covered a lot of material, and I think it was, pretty comprehensive. I hope there's more to learn because I'm, ready to dig in on, whatever other, elements there are. But I think we covered a lot of ground. That's great. I thought the exercise in the beginning of imagining what we would feel like coming out of a meeting was a really great one to do. And I really value that group dynamic where you want to thrive on resolution and people feeling good about the decisions that are made, and everyone walking out being inspired on taking the next steps on whatever was talked about. So I thought that was a really great exercise. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Yay.
Yeah.
Sage, and then Willie.
Yeah, this answered a few of the questions I had, so I really appreciate it. And I'm definitely gonna be individually following up on this to learn some more. I think the coming away from it, I definitely feel energized. I feel like the content was really well provided. And I feel like I learned something quickly. So that's my feedback.
Willie, and then I'll go.
Well, I thought it went too fast, and I'm trying to figure out what it is I learned. So I'm old, and I take a lot of time to figure stuff out. But I appreciate your energy and your commitment, and I look forward to trying it out in the next meeting we have. I appreciate it.
Thank you for that feedback. Yeah, feedback for myself, just I think it went well, especially given the power outage. I do get very excited about this, so I can speak pretty quickly. So that's good feedback for me to kind of bring that down a little bit. And yeah, there's so much to know, and there's a lot to learn. But I think for people who are really excited to learn, that'd be a really great opportunity to get on the implementation circle, so you have an excuse to kind of do a little deep dive on what these processes look like. So yeah, okay, great. Well, thank you so much. And yeah, next step would be maybe talking about this at your next meeting, seeing if you want to form a circle, an implementation circle, and I can kind of help talk that implementation circle through the process of identifying the existing power in the organization and then kind of going from there, doing that power mapping and yeah, governance agreements. So awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. So I hope that you have a great rest of your Sunday and that I'll be seeing you again soon. Feel free to follow up on email, and I'll probably reach out in a week if I don't hear from you, or maybe whenever your next meeting is. So, okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Andra.
Thanks. Wow, a good example of finishing on time.
Yeah, unusual.
Something we need to work on. I gotta go too. See you guys.
We'll see y'all. Thank you, everybody, for being here. We'll be in touch.
This was great. Appreciate her coming in.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
Yeah.
definitely.
She just, since there's a few of us here,
Them.
she exceeded what Julie, you said good things about Andra in advance, but I'm kind of
Well,
naturally
until you
skeptical.
experience it yourself.
Yeah, so she exceeded my expectations.
Yeah.
So, not because of you, because of my own, general skepticism.
I'm
So,
still recording, wondering if I should shut off the record. Sage, did you have, what the heck? I can always cut the end.
well, I don't think there was anything wrong with that
Oh,
one,
no,
but
no.
if anybody has anything to say that shouldn't be recorded, we can take it out. Or maybe we should end it because there's no point in
Yeah. Yeah.
people getting this. In fact, if
Any
you could
relevant
cut off what I
before
just
I hit
said,
before
it's
I hit
probably not
stop,
really relevant, to the whole
Yeah.
thing. It's a
Sage, did you have any?
unnecessarily,
Well, then,
it's a vestigious tale. If that makes sense, the vestigial tale.
all right. Well, I guess I'll stop the recording.